Hi, everyone. This is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy. And be sure to check out our blog and our Facebook page. And I subscribe to our channel. And our great sponsors, Philadelphia and Abitativa Casa in Italy Rooting. And my guest today is a fabulous jazz singer, Vanessa Racci. So welcome, Vanessa. Thank you for being here. We wanted to be live for everybody, but my software wasn't working right. So you'll have to watch us in the edit.
Thank you for having me.
No, it's my pleasure. It's really, really my pleasure. I'm really excited. I got to see Vanessa for the first time about 3 weeks ago at a Rutgers at the New Jersey Italian Heritage Commission event, and it blew me away. I loved it.
Oh, thank you so much for saying that. I have to say it was a really great show. Like everybody was vibing, like the band was just great. All the musicians I wanted were available. It was really great.
Yeah, they were super. They were really,
Yeah,
really good, and it's good. You know, musicians. It's tough for the musicians to play in the afternoon. I know that.
I know, right? I think the call time was 10 o'clock. They were like, 10 o'clock?
Uh,
Wow, that's so early. I was like, I'm sorry, guys. But they loved it. They loved it.
You know, I used to play in a band in Tampa, and you know, we're obviously older and we're playing older songs to older people, and they used to book us at 10 o'clock at night, and I would tell them, I said, you know, the people that are going to come and see us are going to be they want to see us at 6, not at 10.
Yeah, and yeah, I don't blame them.
So you know, when did your Italian family come, and where did they settle?
Yeah, sure. So it was the very early 1900s, and I had family from Puglia, from Monteleone di Puglia. And it's so funny, like as I'm saying this, people are reaching out to me, like reached out to me right before this on my Instagram that said, "Hello, I'm from Monteleone di Puglia." I was like, and I live in the US. I'm like, "Oh my God, no way," because that's a rare place to be from. Like a lot of people are from Napoli, from Sicily, but not many people from Monteleone di Puglia because it's a very rural mountain town. But most of my heritage is from Puglia, and then I have heritage in Calabria and Napoli as well.
Yeah, that's similar to me. My mother's family is from Torito in Bari. So
Ah,
I don't know how
beautiful.
close it is to you, but
Me neither.
that's it. And they came around 1915. And my father's parents were from Naples, but I have, you know, scattered out about various areas of Italy myself.
Yeah,
And
Southern Mutt.
yeah, and where did they settle? In this,
They came and settled in East Harlem, New York, and also the Bronx. So typical New York Italian neighborhoods. Both of the Pugliese great grandfathers, one settled in the Bronx and one settled on 112th and Second Avenue in East Harlem.
yeah, that's where my wife's mother was from. She was originally from Little Italy on Spring Street, and then they lived up there for a long time. And you know, I don't want to sound stupid, but I will. Uh, I knew very little about the Italians in East Harlem until, yeah, not that,
Right?
just recently, to be honest with you.
Right. I think there's what is the book my friend Pat O'Boyle from the Italian American podcast, he told me to read and I bought it and I read most of it. It was The Madonna of 115th Avenue, I think it was called, and it's about the community in East Harlem when the Italian Americans first settled there and how they did these parades and um used to create limbs out of wax and put them on the Madonna. Because if you had an ailment in your leg or your arm or whatever, you were supposed to like have a wax figure of that and give it to the Madonna and she would heal you or whatever. It's a very interesting book. But
No,
anyway, sorry, little
no,
tangents.
that's fine. No, that's great. I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
No, I always like when,
Yeah.
you know, people talk about books that they read because it is, you know, it is a part of our culture.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that we were at the San Gennaro Festival one time. I don't know, it must have been, oh boy, I was still must have been 30 years ago now or something. And they had they had the statue in the window with all the money on it. And we were
Hmm.
standing there, a few of us looking at it. And two guys come out and say, "What are you doing?" "We're just looking. Don't look no more."
What? You're not allowed
Okay.
to look at it? Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
we weren't
Okay.
allowed. We were there a little bit too long for
They
them.
didn't
So we
want you to
got
count the the money. That's what it was.
and yeah, we had suits and ties on and everything,
Yeah.
because I worked downtown and we used to go there. Um,
That's so funny.
so do you know what your grandparents did when they got here? What kind of business they were?
Yeah. On my mother's side, the Prisciantelli side, he was a piano tuner, interestingly enough.
Wow.
And
Okay.
he came here in the early 1900s, got work in East Harlem, and then got sick with the first pandemic, the Spanish flu, and died very young after having five children.
Mm.
So I think he was around 30 years old when he died. But it's so sad, right? To like be so excited to come to America, to this new land of opportunity, and then like die so
Yeah.
soon after you come. So that was his fate, unfortunately. And then the other great grandfather, he was from also Puglia, but was very dark skinned, and they thought he was black and sent him down to work on a chain gang in Georgia, and he escaped. The very interesting
Wow.
stories. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
and then he escaped and came back to New York, and I don't remember what his profession was, but he found work back in New York.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. I've never heard a story like that before.
Yeah, yeah, because well, when a lot of the darker skinned Italian Americans from southern Italy, when they first came to the US, we were also discriminated against. Um, Especially the ones that came to New Orleans, and there was that mass lynching
Mhm.
in New Orleans in early 1900s, I believe. I don't know if it was late 1800s,
Late
but
1800s. Yeah,
late
we're
1800s.
actually I'm working on a documentary about that,
Oh,
about our
wow.
whole story,
Yeah.
and things.
So I was really surprised to find out that it happened in my family, especially since I'm so pale, but nobody did that. But yeah, my grandfather told me that, and I was like, wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, you should see my wife is she's half Italian, half Sicilian, and half Puerto Rican, and she's whiter than white with blue eyes.
Yeah,
and
yeah, isn't that
and
funny? Yeah.
and she used to have a lot of trouble growing up, because
Really
she grew up in Spanish Harlem, and
interesting.
they just they thought she was just this white girl when she was half Puerto Rican,
Right.
half Sicilian.
That's so funny. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
funny. My husband is half Puerto Rican, also bright blue eyes, very pale. And we went on our honeymoon. Well, we went on like a mini moon, I would call it, like right after our wedding to Puerto Rico, and then we went on a big honeymoon in Italy. But on part of our honeymoon in Puerto Rico, they looked at his ID and they were like, Rodriguez? No. They like didn't believe him. He's like, yeah, my grandfather's from Fajardo, and they were like, no.
My wife's sister still lives there. She went, she went there. She went back when she was, I don't know, 14 or 16 and stayed there, wound up getting married there. And she's lived
Wow,
there basically her entire
so
life.
beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. They're from, Mayaguez. Um,
Oh, okay.
so, the other side of the island, I guess, from San Juan. Um, so I keep that when I talk to people because I'm always talking to older people, so it's nice to talk to somebody young.
Oh, thank
And when
you.
you said great grandfather, I'm thinking,
Yeah.
yes, that's right, yes, great grandfather. My grandparents came in 1915, probably
Right.
around the same time. And I think my mother would be turning 100 this year if she was still alive.
Oh,
And when it's like you'll find out, but it's so hard to believe. My great grandfather was born in 1853.
wow. That's cool.
And yeah, well, that's not when you're 74 like me. It's not cool.
It's not cool. Yeah, my grandfather was like he was an old father. Like he probably could have been my great grandfather, even though he was my my first grandfather. But he was born in 1913 in East Harlem, and he lived to 102. So as long as I can remember, he was always old. He was old my whole life, but he was in great shape, up until 100, and then he had a stroke and wound up having to use a wheelchair, but he was still like
That's
kicking.
great. That's fantastic.
And I would
Yeah.
ask him, "What's your secret, Grandpa?" And he said, "The vino."
That's what I told my wife. That's what I told my
Yeah.
wife. I said,
He
have a
said he
glass
was
of.
he said he was preserved in alcohol. That was his joke.
Well, that's funny. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, my parents were kind of on the younger on the youngest in their families. My father was the youngest. My mother was the second youngest. So same thing. My grandparents were old, and my father's mother, she just spoke Italian. I mean,
Wow.
whenever my father would speak to her, actually Napoletan, because that's the dialect that they were speaking. Um, and I don't know if he. I mean, she spoke a little bit of English, but when he would converse with her, he would speak to her in Italian, and that's one of the things that I said. They didn't teach us. I wish they taught us.
I know.
I'm
Because
trying to
that
learn.
generation, they were trying to assimilate and be accepted. And so my grandfather was told, you only speak English in this house.
Mm,
You don't speak Italian. And so they lost a lot of the language,
yeah,
which is
yeah,
sad.
it
It
is
wasn't as
sad.
accepted then to retain your native language.
Yeah, yeah. So, what got you started singing jazz? I find that fantastic.
Yeah, so like many Italian Americans in New York, I grew up living with my grandfather, which was a nice, special experience. He was in the basement apartment, but my mother tells me, no, it was the first floor walk-in. Don't say basement apartment. The first floor walk-in. And he was very much a part of my life. He was my babysitter. He drove me back and forth to school, made me frittatas for Italian class. I would go with him to the racetrack at Yonkers Raceway and bet on the horses. And then because he was so much a part of my life, like I would listen to all the music that he played. And he used to play Connie Francis, Frank Sinatra, Jerry Vale, Louis Prima, Dean Martin, etc. And I grew up listening to all those old songs. And a lot of them were jazz, and I didn't realize it at the time, and also Italian and Italian American classics. So, my grandfather kind of wound up being like my best friend. We're kind of like similar in personalities, where we just like bold and get the most out of life, And so we got along like really well. And he would call me his little celebrity and always slip me like $20 every time after I sang. We used to split pasticciotto during Sunday dinners because that was our favorite. That's a very popular barese pastry. And and when he passed away, I was heartbroken because he was honestly like my best friend, and I thought he was so cool. He was just
Mm,
the coolest guy ever. He was just like nothing bothered him. He like he said everything in moderation. He would drink a little bit every day, eat what he wanted, but he would always say abbastanza, enough, everything in moderation. And he just like did what he wanted, and he just like loved life. He was really cool, and he had such a hard upbringing, right? Like with his father dying young, living in a small apartment with like 8 children because his mother remarried and she had more children. He said they used to like um, have to go outside to go to the bathroom. They had to um, kill their dinner. Like they had chickens and bunnies in the backyard. They would kill their dinner. It was very like, if you've seen Cabrini, the movie
hmm
Cabrini, it was
hmm
very like that. Like it was kind of a slum,
Yeah, yeah.
And he fought in World War II. Um, would run from and hide from the Irish gangs that were trying to beat them up at the time. Like the stories he had were so interesting and cool to me. The fact that he like survived all that, and then he just had this like really free, happy attitude toward life is just was really cool. Um Anyway, so long story, but after he passed away, I wanted to keep his memory alive, and the way I wanted to do that was to reinvent the Italian classics he taught me with jazz arrangements, because I had fallen in love with both jazz and Italian music, and that was my first album, Italiana Fresca, which I launched in 2017. And unfortunately, he wasn't here to hear it, but I'm sure he heard it from above. And then I started touring around the country. And when I did a show in New Orleans, I went to the Italian American Museum and the Jazz Museum, and I just learned how much Italian Americans were steeped in jazz. There's such a rich history, and you saw that whole show I did at Rutgers about the history from Nicola Rocca all the way through to Louis Prima, Harry Warren, Henry Mancini, Chick Corea, John Pizzarelli. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do an album about the the prominent Italian Americans in jazz. And I did that one and launched it in 2022. And that's been very successful because it's more like educational than the first one. And so I wind up doing it in more educational settings like museums and Italian American culture clubs, universities, etc. And I absolutely love it. I love it. I'm able to like do what I love and really promote my culture and my passions. So,
Yeah, that's fantastic. And what I love that I didn't know about Harry Warren. I had no idea that he
right?
was Italian.
Right? I know because he changed his name. Salvatore Antonio Guaragna was his name from Brooklyn. And he contributed over 800 songs to our Great
Yeah,
American Songbook.
yeah.
It's incredible. And people don't even know that he was Italian American. And unfortunately, like he's so old and he was like, from my grandfather's time or even great grandfather's
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
And a lot of the music that he wrote are classics, but it's older music. And so I tried to do like a tribute show on Harry Warren, and people were like, who is that? And it's like, oh, this should be a household name. But unfortunately now, like people, the generations I think that would care have passed. But I still care, but.
No, but we all know those songs, and
That's fair. I only
I
have eyes
find,
for you, Jeepers
yeah.
Creepers, At Last. But I know these songs because I'm a jazz singer, but a lot of people my age like don't know them.
We'll be right back.
Experience Italy like never before, traveling with a scheduled group or create your own bespoke tour with friends with philitaly.co. Pack your bags and follow Phil. That's www.philitaly.co. Yeah,
So
but I think you're reintroducing it, and especially introducing it to us who don't know it. Of course, I always love growing up, him and watching. You used to see him on Ed Sullivan or whatever, Louis Prima, because he was that big bold kind of guy and dance
yeah,
around and that kind of stuff.
he was the quintessential Italian American jazz artist.
Buonasera, signore, buonasera. It is time to say goodnight to family. Oh, it's hard for us to whisper buonasera without a word of the Mediterranean Sea. This morning, signore, we'll go walking. Where the mountains and the sun come in sight. Everybody out there to do the shine. We'll stand and linger, dreaming of a wedding.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So I grew up. The big bands had faded out. Rock and roll was just starting to come in, but I used to watch Abbott and Costello movies every Saturday morning or every Sunday morning whenever they were on, and you were exposed to the Andrew Sisters and people like that, so you heard all
Yeah,
those songs.
yeah, yeah. And I know it because of my grandfather, but like no, like I know what you're talking about, but like most people my age would have no idea who the Andrews sisters were. You know? So I'm kind of a weird one, but I love it. I love it.
No, that's funny, and I think everybody thinks the Italian classics are Volare and those kinds of songs, which they are in a sense,
Hmm.
but it's deeper than that. But of course, my parents grew up with Frank Sinatra. My father didn't like Frank Sinatra for some reason. He never told me why,
Oh, that's so funny.
but they used to go see him. I think my father told me they would see him in Brooklyn for 25 cents with a movie.
Wow. Could you
Back
imagine
in
25 cents?
1941 or
Okay.
something, 42, whatever.
Yeah.
He was just a kid and just starting out, and he used to, I guess, you know, sing wherever, like
Yeah.
most people have to start out, right? Um, but I think, exposing people to, and again, the I have to figure out some way of doing something about Harry Warren because I just think that's fantastic. The
Yeah.
other guy who,
I do a tribute show. Shameless plug, but I do a tribute show. And I performed it at Birdland last year, Birdland Jazz Club in New York City, um, in December 3rd last year. And then we did one at the Columbus Citizens Foundation. But anyway, so if anyone's interested in that educational show, it's really great. And I do it with Bob Lamont, who is one of the directors for the Department of Education in New York City. And so he's like a historian on
Mhm.
music, and he has all of these rare clips and movie clips and sound clips that he shares during the show. So it's not just me singing, it's like
Oh,
also,
nice.
yeah, it's really cool. Anyway, sorry. Just want
No,
to throw that
no,
out
no,
there.
no, no, that's good. That's why I have you on, so people get to know them, that they want to book you that they get to book you and hear all these kinds of. I mean, the other guy who's not Italian, who I absolutely love, he's my favorite of all time of everything, because he's the coolest guy ever in the world. Cab Calloway, I
Hmm.
just love. I I could watch him forever. He just blows me away, and
Yep.
definitely one of the coolest guys that ever lived.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, and yeah, I don't know if he grew up in Harlem. I'm not sure exactly where he grew up. If he's even from New York,
I don't know.
I'll have to check that
He
out. But
must have been from New York because there's like a Callaway house named after them in Purchase, New York, I believe. But anyway.
oh, okay, so quite possibly. But that's what I liked about your show too, because you went through, you kind of went through, I guess, 100 years, and what I found fascinating there too was, because I've never been a big jazz guy, but what I found fascinating was when they were talking about the roots of jazz, and I don't think people associate, like you mentioned earlier, uh, the whole jazz sound. A lot of it comes from Italians.
Yeah, well, what I'll say is, obviously jazz is rooted in traditional African American roots music, like the slave call and response and rhythm and blues. Um, but Italian Americans had immigrated to Sicily at the same time the jazz was kind of forming. And so they were like experiencing it. The Sicilian Americans were experiencing it at the same time. And Nicola Rocca formed a band, the original Dixieland Jazz Band, and he wound up making the very first jazz recording in history. And he would be more celebrated in history if he didn't. He claims that he like started jazz single-handedly, which obviously is a grand overstatement. And a lot of people like, shoved him out of history because he was supposedly racist. I don't know. But so that's probably why it's not talked about more because he shot himself in the foot. But he could have been a great part of history if he wasn't, dumb.
Staring out the news, you better take that jazz band ball. 'Cause there's a ball of them all five musicians in a small saloon. Reinvent the ragtime blues. Well, they made up their own brand without a note of understand. And then they call it D-I-X-I-E.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know?
Well, and that's the other thing that I've been discovering. I never realized that there was such an Italian population in the South, and that they were brought
Oh
there.
yeah.
And
Mainly Sicilian, yeah.
yeah, and I had a guest on who explained it really succinctly, because he said they tried, after the Civil War, they tried bringing the Germans down there, but they couldn't handle the heat. So
Interesting.
So that's why he's been an historian on this. He's from Italy, actually. He's Italian, lives in Italy, but he wrote papers on this, and they couldn't handle the heat. So when the Italians started coming over in the late in the 1800s, late 1800s, 1880s, they brought them down there and they were used to it.
Yeah,
So,
that's so
so they were
funny.
cutting the sugar cane, and he said that the the um the blacks were basically the supervisors because they knew how to cut the cane and how to do the cotton and all that kind of stuff. So, the Sicilians were working under them. And
Yeah.
another fantastic story about, I think it was Arkansas. This is wild. The guy who formed or owned the Long Island Railroad bought a place in Arkansas and moved Italians there to work. And then eventually he was going to turn the property over to them, but he died like a year and a half after, and that just all went away. And they all had to just, kind of fend for themselves and stuff
Oh,
like that.
wow.
There's so many intricacies with our history that
Yeah.
people just don't know about.
Yeah, I know. And I think that's why, because a lot of people ask me, like, why are Italian Americans have so much pride when you're not from Italy directly, you don't live in Italy, it's not like your first generation, your second, third, fourth. And I think it's because like there was such a struggle and we weren't accepted right away, and I can still hear these stories from my grandparents, and it made them be more like insular and can stay with their own kind,
Mhm.
more. And I think that's why there's more of that like tribal mentality for Italian Americans, but more so in the East, in the Northeast, in New Orleans. But you don't see that as much in California because they weren't discriminated against. By the time I think they got to California, like it was just a different atmosphere, I guess. Maybe it was less cutthroat. I don't know. But I don't, you know what? I have to ask Mariana Gatto because um, she just published a book called The Italian Americans of Los Angeles. So I want to ask her, like, why were we like Italian Americans less discriminated against in California? Why did that? Why was that? Because you'll notice that they're like less tribal there than they are in the Northeast.
And maybe it could be because maybe it wasn't just as established as like New York and New Orleans and
Yeah,
stuff like that. It was still kind of almost a frontier back then, you know.
right.
And maybe that has something to do with it. I have two cousins who live in San Diego that three that they're from Naples, born in Naples, that I never knew who they were until just a few years ago. Because as far as I knew, my grandmother and her aunt were the only two that came to America from her family. And just before we went over there, I met them. Met their grandparents or parents. I'm like, these guys are living in San Diego. Who knew? Now, have you been back? Have you been back to the
To Italy?
to the hometown? Yeah, to the hometown
Oh,
specifically.
of course, ma certo.
Yeah.
Yes. No, I went, so I did my first time in Italy, I did all the touristy things. I went to Venice, Rome, Positano, because, those were, I was most excited to see those. And then after that, I went to Puglia in, did I, oh no, I think I went back to Venice. No, I went back to Rome and Napoli with my family. It was like going with the Romanos. It was really funny. And then I went to Puglia, and that's when I did my roots trip, and I went to the towns that my great grandfathers were from, and that was really, really cool because you see a lot of people that look like you see a lot of people with the same last name.
Yeah.
It's so cool. Like and they almost look like American because they look like me and I'm American, so I feel like they're they can speak English and then they speak Italian. Um and it was a very cool experience to see the humble beginnings. Um so Monteleone di Puglia, we almost got lost. We drove for 3 hours out of body up into the winding roads in this mountain town, and I found the house that my great grandfather was from, and I FaceTimed my father and I was like, "Look, Dad, this is where, your grandfather was from." And he was like, "Knock on the door." I'm like, no, I don't want to knock on the door. And he's like, do it, do it. I'm like, no, I don't want to disturb anybody. And he was like, do it. What if you're not there again for a long time? It's a once in a lifetime experience. Like, what if one of our family members comes out? And so I knocked on the door, and it was after 5 p.m. And the guy that came out was like completely wasted. And I was, it was so terrible. And he was speaking to me in like drunk, broken Italian, like not even intelligible Italian. So it was hard because, obviously Italian's not my first language. And so I struggle to really pay attention to understand what people are saying. And when he was slurring his words, I had no idea what the hell he was saying. I was like using a translator app, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a disaster. And then I couldn't like get rid of him. I was just like, okay, mi dispiace, ciao, ciao, mi dispiace. And I was like trying to leave, and he kept like talking to me. It was so funny. Oh my gosh. But so that was an experience. And but they did say that they know a lot of people with my last name in the town. We just didn't have an opportunity to like meet any of them while we were there. And then I went to where the Prisciantellis were from on my mother's side, and they were from Gioia del Colle, which is like 15 minutes outside of Bari, and that's also where I think the Sylvester Stallone's family's from. And that was different. Like that was not rural. That was very much city, and it was a little bit like it was very very like urban and edgy. There was like graffiti everywhere. So it was a very different vibe than Monteleone di Puglia.
Yeah, we really like Bari a lot because it was, it's all white. And
Yeah.
once I figured, we stayed in the historic part of town. So once I figured out how to get back to the apartment, we were in pretty good
Yeah.
shape because I kept getting lost. And then I said to my wife, I
Yeah.
said, well, I think if we walk along the water and we
Yeah.
make 2 turns, we'll be there.
And it's so funny when I was in Bari, I loved it. It felt like home. And I think because it
Yeah.
reminded me of the Bronx. Like if you have you ever gone when everybody's sitting outside of their apartments and they were like um, barbecuing on the streets and having like soccer parties or football parties, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like the Bronx. I feel like I'm in the Bronx.
Well, I thought it was very, very safe there because especially at night along that stretch where the water is, you saw, 3 or 4 generations there. You saw old people, you saw middle-aged people, you saw young, you saw kids,
Mhm.
uh, and everybody just seemed to be very mellow and passive and, have just, in their own world having a good time. Yeah, maybe it's because St. Nicholas is there. Maybe that's why. Now, my mother's, I don't know if this story is true. I did a little research on it. I did find something. My mother's last name is Nicoletti. And
Mm.
supposedly, what one of the, stories is that they were the people who went to steal St. Nicholas's bones from Turkey. When they came back with the relics, they called them the Nicoletti. Now, I don't know if that's true. There was something written about it that it may be true, or it could just be, a story that after, 800 years or whatever it was that they made up. And my grandmother and my grandfather were both had the same last name. They were both Nicoletti, but they weren't related because I think
Oh,
it's
so funny.
common in
Yeah.
that area. And my grandfather was from Acquaviva dell'Elefante, and she was from Torito, not that far away, But we went to Acquaviva. Yeah, again, that's a real small town. They're not in the mountains, those towns, but it's real small. And we went during, we got there about 2 o'clock, and there was not a soul on the entire street. Not one person on the entire street. And I interviewed somebody from there. He came here in the I think 1960, I think he said he came here around there. And he said when he left, there were 2 cars in the whole town.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? Isn't that wild? And he said there's not 2 parking spaces, which is kind of true. And I always like to ask this question because we are kind of a food people. Did you grow up just eating Italian food? Did you have some American food mixed in there? Or when you went to the beach, did you bring peanut butter and jelly? Did you bring eggplant parmesan?
Oh my gosh, I went to school with it was kind of a hybrid of Italian and American. I had salami sandwiches on white bread and yeah, but I definitely we definitely ate a lot of Italian food, but also American. Obviously, we are a blend of both cultures. But my favorite cuisine is obviously the Italian cuisine, and some of my favorite dishes are like spaghetti puttanesca. And my grandfather used to make that really well. Frittatas, he made frittatas. They were so delicious. Chicken cacciatore. What else are like good family recipes? Spaghetti con tonno. Spaghetti alle vongole is one of my favorites. So yeah, those are kind of like the family faves.
Well, I do most of the cooking. I took over that job when I retired, and so our deal is I cook, my wife cleans, but
Nice.
but she had to teach me how to make rice and beans, so I have to make rice and beans every once in a while.
Nice,
For
nice.
the spout. I don't do the gandules yet. I leave that to her, but regular rice and beans I can handle. So before we go, and I'm going to say this again, not to embarrass you, but if you want a fantastic show, you want to go see Vanessa, or you want to book Vanessa for your event, you Italian American clubs out there, we're going to get you in our club. I'm going to get you. I sent my wife one of the songs that you sang from the event, and she said, "Oh boy, they'll love her there because I'm one of the young guys there." So
They'll really love me.
no,
That's my
definitely.
demographic.
And yeah, you have to say hello to my friend Jeff. He was at the event with us,
Which Jeff, what's his last name?
Federici.
Oh, okay. I will.
But I went there with two other guys, and we didn't know what to expect. But we just enjoyed you so much, and then the whole history thing. So I'm getting long-winded here. My wife tells me I talk too much. Before we go, how do people book you, reach you? How do they
Yes.
find your
Thank
music?
you for asking. Yeah, so the easiest way to learn everything about me is on my website, which is vanessaracci.com. So that's VANESSARACCI.com. So you can subscribe to my mailing list so you get alerts on where I'm performing in a city near you. You can just look at my show schedule, read more about my experience and how I came to be. And also, you can follow me on Facebook or Instagram at Vanessa Racci, VANESSARACCI. And I also encourage you to follow my new nonprofit Instagram page, which is Italian Americans in Music. I just started it at the end of last year, and it's a nonprofit devoted to preserving the history of Italian Americans in music and also promoting the future. So, some goals of ours are doing a documentary of Italian Americans in music from Enrico Caruso all the way through to Lady Gaga, and also hopefully providing grants for music education, or scholarships rather is the right word, for music education to further the careers of Italian Americans in music.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, and I'll put all the links out. I'll put them on the screen and everything so everybody can see them. Well, thank you so much for being here. Unfortunately, we had the glitch with Riverside, but we'll do it again
It's
sometime.
okay.
We'll do another one sometime. After you do our show,
Yeah.
we'll do another one.
Sure, sounds good.